I must warn you. What you are about to hear is not the kind of tale recorded proudly in history books. It is a story whispered in taverns, scratched into forgotten manuscripts, and carried on the trembling lips of those too afraid to speak it aloud. They tell of a single night, when a queen, radiant in crimson robes and crowned with jewels that shimmered like fire, summoned 1,000 men into her palace. The great hall doors closed behind them with a thunderous echo, sealing their fate. What unfolded inside was not a feast, nor a celebration of power. It was a ritual one of fear, humiliation, and horror. Men of rank and pride entered with heads held high. But by dawn, they would be shadows of themselves, broken, silent, and forgotten. Stay with me, for this is the story of a queen whose desires became legend. The night 1,000 men entered her hall, and only silence left with them. She was not born into obscurity. From the moment of her birth, her destiny was shaped not by chance, but by the careful hands of those who raised her. Her tutors taught her scripture to command the faith of the devout, poetry to charm the hearts of poets, and the subtle, dangerous art of seduction to bind the will of men stronger than steel. Even as a child, nobles whispered her name. They said her beauty was a weapon sharper than any sword, her gaze more dangerous than an army on the march. When she smiled, generals forgot their strategies. When she spoke, even seasoned priests stumbled over their prayers. By the time she ascended her throne, the court bent around her like reeds before a storm. Ministers obeyed her with trembling hands. Ambassadors returned home unable to describe the strange power they had felt in her presence. She demanded obedience, yes, but she demanded something more dangerous: fascination. Every nobleman who entered her chamber left convinced that he had seen not a mortal woman, but a goddess clothed in silk and crowned with fire. To be near her was intoxicating. To serve her was both blessing and curse. Her voice carried like music, yet behind the melody was command. Her perfume lingered like incense, but in its sweetness was poison. And behind her painted lips, behind the cascade of jewels upon her brow, there burned a hunger that no feast could satisfy, a hunger that no mountain of treasure could extinguish. And most terrifying of all, a hunger that no man, however strong, however clever, however devoted, could ever hope to fill. And yet, beneath the velvet and the gold, there was always an emptiness. A silence in her heart that no prayer could break, no crown could silence. The more she was adored, the lonelier she became. And in that loneliness, her hunger grew twisting, deepening, until it transformed into something darker. It was not enough to be loved. She longed to be feared. At first, her desires seemed harmless mere indulgences of a young queen who believed the world was her stage. Lavish banquets stretched until dawn, silken wine spilling across marble floors, the air thick with incense and laughter. Musicians played until their fingers bled, and dancers collapsed under the weight of endless movement. To the outside world, it was a vision of glory, but within the palace walls, another story began to unfold. Whispers crept through the corridors like smoke. They said the queen's chambers became a place of strange ceremonies, rites no priest dared bless, and no chronicler dared record in detail. Nobles were summoned under torchlight, their pride stripped away as they were commanded to kneel before her throne. The rituals always began with beauty music, dancing, feasts of honey and wine. But beauty was only the mask. What followed was far darker. Men were tested in ways they could not endure. Their bodies pushed to exhaustion, their dignity shattered by humiliation. Some were forced to compete for her favor, others to perform acts so debasing that even the bravest knight trembled. And when the ceremonies ended, the halls echoed not with triumph, but with silence. Those who returned walked differently. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, their lips sealed as if stitched by fear itself. They carried the weight of shame, yet spoke no word of what they had endured. Others never returned at all. Their names were erased from records, their existence reduced to empty spaces in the royal rolls, as though history itself wished to forget them. And still, the queen smiled. To her, it was not cruelty. It was control pure, absolute, undeniable. In her eyes, every gasp of fear, every trembling hand, every bowed head was proof of her power. The rituals were not mere indulgences. They were chains. Invisible shackles that bound noblemen and warriors alike, making them hers in body, mind, and spirit. A man humiliated in her hall could never rise against her throne. A knight broken beneath her gaze could never lift his sword in defiance. And so, with each passing night, her dominion deepened. Not carved into stone, not written in law, but etched into the very souls of those who served her. A reign built not on loyalty but on terror. And then came the night, the most horrifying of all. The queen proclaimed a grand festival, a celebration so lavish that no man dared refuse her call. 1,000 men were summoned into her palace, soldiers hardened by war, nobles draped in jewels, even priests cloaked in their sacred robes. They entered the towering hall with smiles and pride, believing they had been chosen to honor her reign. But the moment the doors slammed shut, the smiles faded. The incense thickened the air until every breath felt heavy, choking. Torches flared against the stone walls, throwing shadows that seemed almost alive. And then the truth spread like fire through the hall. The men were not honored guests. They were offerings. Golden goblets spilled wine in endless streams, staining the silks on the marble floor, like rivers of blood. Veiled dancers swayed in slow, hypnotic circles, their serpentine movements casting grotesque silhouettes upon the walls. Drums pounded louder, drowning the whispers until the very stones seemed to tremble with their rhythm. And there, at the center of it all, sat the queen. Her throne rose above the chaos, her crimson robes flowing like fire, her jeweled crown burning in the light. Her gaze swept across the trembling crowd, not with compassion, not with mercy, but with a hunger that no mortal should ever possess. That night, 1,000 men were bound not by chains of iron, but by her will alone. Their strength crumbled, their dignity shattered. And as the music roared and the dancers spun, their voices were swallowed, silenced beneath the pounding drums and the queen's insatiable command. When dawn finally broke, the palace gates creaked open. But the men who staggered out into the courtyards were not the same men who had entered the night before. Their steps were unsteady, their bodies trembling as if the very ground rejected their presence. Faces once proud and strong now looked pale, drained of all color. Their eyes were hollow, staring at nothing, as though whatever they had seen in the darkness of the queen's hall had stolen their souls. They did not speak. Not of the queen, not of the rituals, not of the horrors that had unfolded beneath the torchlight. Not a single word escaped their lips. They walked like shadows, broken shells of men, and their silence clung to the air like a curse. For the villagers and courtiers who gathered to watch, that silence was louder than any scream. Mothers reached out for their sons only to be met with cold, empty stares. Fathers who once held themselves tall now crumbled to their knees, unable to explain the weight pressing on their hearts. It was not death they feared most. It was the living proof that something far worse than death had taken place inside those palace walls. And so, whispers spread like wildfire across the empire. No one dared speak her name openly, but in hushed tones they called her the Crimson Empress. Some said she had bargained with demons. Others claimed she was no mortal at all, but a goddess of ruin wearing the mask of a queen. But all agreed on one thing. In a single night, she had stolen the voices of 1,000 men, leaving behind nothing but silence and terror. From that day forward, her palace was no longer a place of music and celebration. It became a place of shadows. By day, the halls glittered with gold and marble, but by night, they echoed with silence that chilled the soul. Figures drifted silently through those chambers, serving her wine, fanning her silks, carrying her commands without a word. To visiting dignitaries, they seemed like loyal attendants, disciplined beyond compare. But the people of the capital knew better. They whispered in fear that these were not servants at all, but the 1,000 broken men, the ones who had lost their voices and their wills on that infamous night. Men who once laughed, fought, and lived with fire in their hearts, now reduced to nothing more than shadows in human form. Generals who once strutted with pride now lowered their eyes, terrified to meet her gaze. Priests, behind closed doors, cursed her name as blasphemy made flesh. And nobles who once fought for her favor now fled the court in silence, unwilling to risk being summoned to her chambers. But still, no one dared to oppose her. For what sword could pierce the fear she carried with her? What prayer could break the silence of 1,000 stolen voices? She ruled not only with armies, not only with wealth and gold, but with something far darker. A terror born of rituals no mortal man could endure and no kingdom could forget. And as the years passed, her shadow grew longer. Travelers who neared the capital swore they felt the air grow heavier, as though her presence lingered even outside the palace gates. Some claimed that they saw pale figures wandering at night, men with hollow eyes who vanished when approached. Whether these tales were truth or fear-fed fantasy, it mattered little. The legend itself was enough. Parents hushed their children with warnings of the Crimson Empress. Soldiers spoke her name only in whispers. And rulers from distant lands thought twice before sending envoys to her court, for they feared what fate might await them inside her gilded halls. Her reign was not just a chapter in history. It became a curse spoken across generations, a reminder of the night when 1,000 men entered her service, and became shadows forever bound to her will. And so, her story lingers, carried not in royal decrees or carved monuments, but on the winds of time, whispered in the dark corners of taverns, and hidden between the lines of ancient manuscripts. Was it truth? Was it myth? Or was it a warning woven carefully to remind us of the fragile line that separates devotion from destruction, passion from madness? Some say the ritual was nothing more than exaggerated rumor, born from the envy of rival nobles. Others claim it was a tale invented by priests to strike fear into the hearts of those who strayed too far from faith. But then, there are those who swear it was real. That one queen, draped in crimson and crowned with gold, truly bound 1,000 men in a single night, stealing their strength, silencing their voices, and turning her hunger into legend. And now, the question falls to you. Tell me, what do you believe? Was this merely the work of fearful imagination? Or did one queen truly rule through the most horrifying ritual in history? If you wish to uncover more forbidden and terrifying stories buried in history's shadows, make sure to subscribe and join me once again for the next tale from the dark side of the past.